Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
And what
We're not-
ladies are here and what ladies are here.
I
Hello,
know what you meant.
people.
Hello. I'm not sure I can be referred to as a gentleman, but anyway.
We give you the benefit of the doubt there, David.
Excellent, excellent.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Nothing else aspirational. So good to see everyone.
Yeah, I have a request toward the end when we go over the agenda items. It's not specific necessarily to the work that's being done here, but it is somewhat relevant. So when we get to the end of the current agenda, I have a request.
Can you just add a note on the agenda then, Eric? Because I'll definitely forget. And it could just be Eric's topic. I'm fine with that. All right.
Although
it's
more
5 after.
specificity.
Let's get
I'm sorry.
cracking. Sorry, what, David?
As I say, more specificity would be appreciated.
I mean, I agree, but whatever. I'm not. We're already wigging it, so it's fine. All right, it's 5 after. Let's get a move on. I apologize in advance. I was up very late last night for a family thing, and so I'm not all there. If I'm missing something or whatever, just interrupt and fix it. All right, so for anyone here, I'm going to paste again the link to the tools agenda, which is where we're signing in, and then there's the SBOM everywhere topic, which is what will consume most of this meeting. And that's another topic if we should have a different time or what we want to do with that. But anyway, so sign in if you haven't. And then there's a link to SBOM everywhere. I guess before we go to SBOM everywhere, is there anything tools specific anyone would like to bring up or discuss before we hijack the meeting? Since this is the tooling working group technically. All right, I assume not. Great, SBOM everywhere. All right, the SBOM everywhere, click the link, you get the doc. There's an agenda item for today, well, agenda section, I guess. So for anyone who wasn't here, I'll just kind of summarize where we're going. There's a GitHub repo, which is, we do not have in the meeting info. I will add that later. David, do you mind? Can you pull the GitHub repo up for me quick and just paste it in the chat?
Which GitHub repo?
The SBOM everywhere GitHub repo.
I got it.
You got it. Thank you.
Okay.
So the intent we have is we want to do all of our work out of that. I don't want to work out of Google Docs. I don't want to see us just doing work in meetings. The idea is anything that needs to be done will get an issue. And so there we go. Thanks, Cameron. And obviously we should submit pull requests. We've got some to-do items in this document here around, filling out some more of the scope, as well as we've got a charter that's not really filled out. There's plenty of work to do. So if anyone would like to volunteer, that'd be lovely. But anyway, if we, oops, I just closed my tab. Apologies. So if we look at let me just share my screen. How about that? Might be easier. I can't. This one here. All right. I assume everyone sees this document. That's the agenda. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So here are I put an old business section in. This is what we talked about last week. And we'll kind of briefly go over some of this and then we can tackle some of the new things. Now, obviously not all of the old things are done and it's coming. So I'll give a status update on the Python library funding. So, oh, also Kate isn't here today. She's out. So I will do my best to fill in the details. She gave me a lot of background, so I'm hopeful I'll get it mostly right. This issue for the SBOM library, SPDX library funding, the quick background is we have an SPDX Python library in desperate need of attention. And so we asked the OpenSSF TAC if they would be willing to fund bringing the library up to snuff, and they unanimously voted yes, which is great. So now it's going to the governing board, where the governing board theoretically will approve the spend, and then we can get this moving. And like, for example, SPDX 2.3 came out a couple days ago. Like the Python library doesn't, I don't think it even does 2.2 correctly, but that's it. This is great, right? This is a good example of what the SIG can do and why it will be good to fund it, I guess, is what we'll say when we go to potential donors and funding sources, of showing that it's not just a money fire. We can actually turn your investment into work and progress. So yeah, I'm excited about this one. I think if anyone has questions, just speak up. I'm not gonna, because I'm sharing my screen, it's hard to see if someone has their hand raised. So if like David or someone could maybe just yell out if there's a hand raised. Otherwise, let's keep moving. Kate is working on a one-page overview for SBOMs. So this one is ongoing. I don't know what else to say. I talked to her about it. She said she's working on it. She was busy with SPDX 2.3 stuff. So it's in progress. That's pretty much all. What else is there? The use cases. Kathy, are you on the call? I can't see. Maybe not. I found. Okay, well, assume not.
Don't
So
see.
this one was to start laying down, or who else is here? Cameron, Bunny, David. Do one of you have a status update on this one?
Yeah, so the SBOM use cases, it's still in progress. I think that it is being tracked in that, yeah, right there. I think that it's really what would be helpful would be to get some clarity around the assumptions at the top that state explicitly the like the types of SBOMs, and getting a little more clarity around that. Is that still in the document? I don't know.
What do you mean by types? Do you mean
Yeah,
binary?
yeah, exactly.
I don't understand that question.
I guess like the question is, or no, my ask is to get feedback on the interpretation of those types to find, like, I guess, like defining those types a little more comprehensively.
Okay. Hey,
But I mean, from an update perspective, this is where it's at.
okay, I mean, and that's great. We can look at this. Steve Springett, do you know, does Cyclone DX have these types well defined at all?
I know some of the NTA docs previously had had some of this defined. You might be able to reuse some of the NTA wording. However, build is going to be, just looking at it, is going to be interesting in that, you know, you can create SBOMs during a build process, or you can interpret that as meaning formulation, how something was built, which are entirely two different things.
Yeah, and you're pulling
so
on
that's going to have to be fleshed out.
Yep, exactly. That's the kind of the sentiment I was driving at.
If I may, I have problems with their list because I think they omit some things, but in this particular case, I think produce build is different than produce analyze, because produce analyze is specifically about analysis of source of binaries files to generate the SBOM, whereas produce build, at least in the SPDX definition, I think this is from NTIA, is generating as part of the build process. So I agree with you in general, but I think in that specific case, there is at least some clarity and clear distinction between those two cases. You're not wrong in general. There's
No, no,
problems
no.
with the things there.
I love that because I don't know the reference. Like I would love, so that'd be an instance of like popping a comment to the reference doc. Because
Okay,
that's just an ignorance item on me.
right in the chat. I'm putting a link to the NTIA doc. I think this is the NTIA doc for SPDX, but I don't.
I just put the link on the chat.
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat also. So, but I don't think that's actually unique. I think NTIA kind of agreed on some terms, and then this document was created with that. So I think the definitions just repeat each time. Yeah. Now I actually have some problems because I think there's some important things missing here. Probably one of the most obvious ones is there's nothing that talks about and now there's consuming for views, but nothing about doing risk analysis specifically, and nothing about I need to do an inventory of all my products across my organization which have this vulnerable component in them. And you can argue that consume might be helpful to that, but it's a lot like, hey, a keyboard might be helpful for writing programs. Yes, but I want the program. I don't want the keyboard. There's some higher level key points missing here.
And maybe that it can, so in the GitHub, on that main README, there is a bit that we drive into scoping the intention around this effort. And I don't know if maybe we can tighten scope to kind of have those better boundaries. I don't know.
So one thing that I'm looking at just under the types of SBOMs is the list seems to include both what something is and the life cycle in which something is created at. Those are entirely two different things.
Steve, can
and
I clarify, what do you mean by what something is?
Source SBOMs, not overly useful for most security use cases, but for some. Build time SBOMs, very useful for most security use cases. And then you've got deploy runtime. These are SDLC lifecycle things, which are two entirely different parts of the lifecycle. But there's other parts of the SDLC as well. Now, in Cyclone DX, we differentiate what something is versus the life cycle in which something was produced. We had agreement between in Austin, just so everyone knows, SPDX folks and Cyclone DX folks met up in Austin at the OSSF conference. And it was interesting because Kate and I, we both had agreements that life cycle is really, really important. The NTIA docs, just so everyone knows, life cycle was for the most part omitted from the conversation. It was purely focused on software vendors to software consumers. So the life cycle was really the deploy, right? What you are delivering to the market. So there was a lot of assumptions made in those NTIA docs, just so everyone knows.
That's really helpful, Steve. Thank you for that background. Okay. How are we doing? Does anyone else have any other I guess, no, I want to move on because I don't want to rat hole in this. I think if anyone has any comments or suggestions, we have a GitHub issue and we have a document. Like, let's bring the work there and go to town, and we'll check back in on this at the next meeting and see how things are going. All right, cool. Let's keep moving. We've got NTIA documents into something more friendly, which we have SPDX, CycloneDX, and SWID. Steve said that CycloneDX has a tool center, which is more updated, obviously, than the NTIA documents. I actually haven't looked at your tool center at all. How big is this? This is pretty big. So this is one of my concerns, I guess, I have with this is like, this is an untenable list to normal people. And I don't know what I expect or what I mean yet, but I feel like I would like anything we do to be approachable by people. And I don't, that's all.
And I think that's why, so to me, referencing Cyclone DX more as a specification or a format allows you to kick the technical downstream bulk of the documentation that's actually being actively maintained without it kind of cluttering the conversation, I guess. I think that was in this particular thread, that was what I was attempting to.
Yeah. And I like Vicky's comment at the bottom here too, which was just, it's a very, the lists we have today are very academic. And I like the idea of just gathering a list and then categorizing them, which I think is definitely the right
thing
way.
is, maybe I can say a few words about this. So Kate and I met last week. For some reasons, Kate just invited me, so there was not an intention to exclude Vicky, and I think David was also on the list. And we kind of came up with this template. To our understanding, the purpose of this is we do have a list or lists already of tools, like the 3 NTIA documents, and we wanted to produce a more consumable, human-friendly, and potentially even more machine-consumable version of that, like, for instance, a clone of the LF landscape. So if somebody is in the need of a particular SBOM tool to fulfill some particular use case that will be discussed and defined in the other use case, then we'll take these use case descriptions, for instance, or classifications, and put them into YAML, whatever kind of data format, but there needs to be some that we can feed into, for instance, another instance of the LF landscape, or for instance, the Cyclone DX tool center. But I think that would be the purpose, that somebody who's looking for some tooling can search that place for, let's say, something that can help them fulfill their needs. And then, of course, maintenance is always an issue. Interestingly, again, the LF landscape use case is a very good one because it works in a very distributed fashion. So the tool maintainers, distributors, and so on could kind of maintain the data themselves, kind of taking the burden of us to having to provide a 100% up-to-date list of things. So that was really just the idea behind that. And yeah, so in that sense, to Vicky's comment, I'm wondering, aren't the NTIA documents like a good starting point to kind of at least fill some initial visualizations, some tooling, something with data?
I mean, it could be, but what is the actual goal of this issue? What's the, I guess I'm not seeing a bigger plan for this SBOM Everywhere initiative here. And what the moving parts are. And if this is one of those moving parts, where does it fit in? And who's the target audience? And just, I think we're missing a whole lot of context here, and we jumped immediately into implementation rather than jumping into better planning. And so I think this is very much kind of a cart before the horse and a default for activity. And I just don't know where this particular piece fits in. and what we're trying to accomplish with it, aside from yet another list of SBOM related tooling. And this one happens to be based around NTIA content.
Can you be a little more specific on this, and then also like actionable? I think, yeah.
So with the other mobilization plan SIGs that I'm in, the first step has been to look at the plan, which was put together very, very quickly to present in Washington, was to first look at what had been put together quickly and iterate on what had been learned since then, and refine and come up with a plan for what are the moving pieces, what would we like to accomplish in year 1, year 2, year 3, how can we come up with an actual project plan for this? And for SBOM Everywhere, I don't get the sense that we know that. And I've been in all of the publicly announced SBOM Everywhere meetings, although there have been a number of conversations that have happened kind of along the edges. So I've been in all of those conversations that I have known about. And I still don't see that we have a project plan and everybody's just kind of off doing their own thing. And I don't get the sense that it all comes together into a cohesive plan for SBOM Everywhere.
I agree.
And
I
this
agree.
is one of those pieces. I'm like, okay, this could be important, but where does it fit in? And what's its prioritization? And I'm not looking for to add a bunch of bureaucracy to the process, but I would like some sort of process, because right now it kind of feels haphazard and chaotic.
I would
and I would like
actually,
I would love to see a
agree with
better,
that.
I would love to see a better scoping and a plan, and to see whether, do we need budget? Are we going to hire people to do some of this work? What is the work we're going to hire them to do?
Do you think there's enough market data to actually though substantiate or even like address a proper way to go about this particular subject matter? Because I don't.
I think that could be part of what the group does. If that does not exist, first look to see whether it does exist. If it doesn't exist, hire someone to develop that market data. But the goal is SBOM Everywhere, right? What does that mean? And what do we require in order to make that happen? So I'm sorry to kind of screech the, yes, sir. I'm totally in the middle of an email, but I can either write or I can talk, so.
No, you're absolutely right. But we need someone to write this down and make it a thing. There's this scope section of the README that Cameron and I started putting together. But this part here, the draft this needs a new line. But this is what was written down in that document. And so we don't have enough direction. I agree.
I would love it if
Exactly.
not to point fingers, but you are kind of driving the bus. And
I am totally driving the bus, and I'm asking you to write this down.
I am totally writing it down, absolutely, to provide some sort of feedback and guidance. But I would love, as a community, if we could come together and shape the direction of this, rather than everyone running off to do their own thing and then coming back and trying to kind of coordinate those things and put them together into a puzzle that we don't even know the shape of yet.
I think that's the intent behind the repo as well. And so active participation in the repo, I think, will help overwrite anything that is not, proper today, and is open for merge requests by everyone.
Absolutely, but I do think that we could use a bit more, a better framework around this than, hey, there's a thing to just go ahead and do it. Setting up expectations, coming up with, action items, standard project and program management sort of stuff, I think would be very helpful right now. And yes, Josh, I am writing it down and I will be working on that.
I would like, can you put it in the GitHub repo? I'd really like it in the README.
Yes, I will do my best to do that
So,
around the 18,000 other things it feels like I'm doing right now. Yes, I will work on this.
Sure. And look, but David, I'm going to let you speak in just a second, but I wanted to address a couple of things from Vicky first. It is disorganized. I'm not a good organizer. I need help with that. I'm very much the cracked in open source development model person. And so we build the bus as we go down the road. And I think more organization is great. but that means someone has to do it. And so Vicky's going to help. And anyone who wants to help Vicky, like, please get involved and help. There's nothing that annoys me more than a bunch of people who show up to meetings and bitch and moan and then never help. Like, that's not going to cut it. So if you want it done, you're going to do it. And that's great. But yeah, that's my thing. It's I think we all have our own strengths, and project management isn't mine. So thank you. I truly appreciate it. All right, David, please.
Yeah, so I think Vicky's on something in terms of, hey, let's step back. What's the goal here? So when I see this whole SBOM everywhere, what I think is the intent is we need specific tools, easily available, and I would say certain kinds of them need to be freely available open source tools, because otherwise we won't get them everywhere. And in particular, I have in mind 3 specific categories. At least the first 2 I think need to be open source, widely available. One is generation of SBOMs during build time. Second, analysis of SBOMs to figure out potential risks, and do risk evaluation by potential users. Number 3 is, I am an organization. I just heard about this really bad vulnerability. Which products have it? That's much higher level than the, hey, I want to be able to read an SBOM. Don't care. I don't just want to read an SBOM. I want to read an SBOM to do something. Now, I actually do care, because, of course, we don't want to rewrite those tools 8 gazillion times. We need to have formats and so on. But I think those are the 3 primary use cases. I acknowledge that there's other use cases, like analyzing a final product to figure out what's in it. I'm sure that people will need those tools. I also think it's a losing battle. If you've got a bunch of bits and you're trying to figure out what's in it, the one thing I can be sure of is that you're almost certainly wrong. So I'm sure people will need to do that, but that's where I would suggest we not focus. It's the build time, because that's where the data is. Get the data out, consume it so we can make individual decisions on products. And for organizations, I got a crisis. Where is the crisis? Or where's the probable most risky places where the crisis can happen? And if we can get tools to cover those 3 cases, we're doing well. Sorry?
Can you make sure you write all this down?
Yes, I've actually written this down elsewhere, but I will. Let's see here. Where would you like me to write this down? Do you want to write this in the SBOM Everywhere SIG agenda meeting
Sure.
notes?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
We can go up from there.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm sure there's other cases. As I said, there are other things that people want to do for sure. But I would like to kind of focus, and let's figure out the cases we most care about, and then basically, at least for the first 2, get tools into people's hands that just do the job well, quickly, and people can move on with their lives.
Cool. Thank you, David. Tracy?
So when, I'll lower my hand before I forget. So when I, listen to this conversation, what I believe is one of our challenges is that, Josh, can you scroll where you were, where it's the section on our scope? Okay, we have this scope, but I have never seen, and I have ideas of it, but I have never seen what the problems are. And sometimes we have to clearly define our problems before we can begin really moving forward in a way that makes sense for everybody. So for example, if we just look at that first sentence, that scope sentence, the barriers to generation, consumption, and adoption of SBOMs. What are those barriers? Do we have a clear idea of what those barriers are? I've been in this business a long time. We've been generating SBOMs for 20 years, to be quite honest. I don't really, and at many different levels, all the way down to all the different types that you're talking about. But there are barriers that companies are going through right now in terms of the generation of them in the DevOps pipeline, the consumption of them, getting them outside of a text file, and being able to consume them outside of that. We don't have that well defined here. And I feel like it would be a useful exercise for us as a group to go through and really identify what those barriers are, because it's the barriers that we're trying to overcome, and we don't even have them really well defined.
I agree 100%.
So maybe that's a conversation for a future, maybe we can all think about the barriers and have a discussion someplace, maybe out in, I don't, GitHub discussions are great too. If we're going to focus everything on GitHub, it might be benefit us to use the discussions to have these kinds of discussions. So when we have the time, we can sit down and start throwing out some ideas and in this case, identify what we believe the barriers are.
I agree. Hey, David, I want you to do me a favor. Give me a new line where you're typing and then
Done.
go back up. Thanks, man.
David, do you mean for your hand to still be up?
No, it's an old hand, sorry.
Okay, but it's a fine hand.
And I'm going to create an issue of Tracy's question in GitHub shortly, and then we can start that discussion. Steve, what's up?
Yeah, so it's interesting, the three things that David pointed out in terms of the generation. I think there's a lot of tools that do this today. We're kind of swimming in tools, which is actually one of the problems, actually. There's a lot of choice, regardless of Python or Java or JavaScript or whatnot. There's a lot less tools. As you go down for a risk analysis, there's a lot less tools. And then you go down to the identification of products in my organization. There's even fewer of those tools. So it's kind of this cascading type of thing, which I find interesting. I think there's one other classification of tools that simply don't exist at all, which I just want to maybe put on the radar. The OWASP software component verification standard. I'm not sure if anyone knows what that is, but it's a way to measure and improve software supply chain assurance. Very similar to SALSA. I would equate SCVS as a little bit wider scope, a little less prescriptive, whereas SALSA is narrowly scoped and more prescriptive, both with the same intent. But anyway, the SCVS project, we are working on a taxonomy of all the different types of capabilities and data that can be represented in a bill of materials. And it is both a taxonomy as well as a maturity model. And the two deliverables that this project will have is one, a PDF, because one of the things we need to do is educate the populace that there is life beyond the NTIA minimum elements. And there's all these other things that that organizations can take advantage of once they get beyond that. But two, and probably the most important deliverable, is machine readable JSON, machine readable representations of the taxonomy and maturity model. And with that, I think a new classification of tools can exist to analyze a bill of material and tell the end user what this bill of material can be used for. For example, right now we have a case where I can generate a tool, generate a bill of material in a tool and assume as an end user that I can use it for security use cases, for example, when in reality, I may not be able to. And that kind of transparency just does not exist today. So we're hoping that with this taxonomy and maturity model that, I think we have a chicken and egg issue. And I think this is a really great opportunity for OSSF to potentially fund this new classification of tools, which I don't think exists today.
So, okay, I have a clarifying question for you. So you mentioned the software component verification standard. Is this tied to that? Or are these completely separate things?
It is a sub-project from the SCVS. So SCVS is already a standard. It's referenced in its entirety by NIST SSDF, for example. But we are also delivering a BOM maturity model, which covers obviously software, it covers hardware, covers services, it covers ML, covers both of the things that Cyclone supports as well as SPDX supports, and things that, quite frankly, neither one support yet. So it is taking a very holistic view of the bill of materials space in a completely agnostic way, and assigning difficulties of capturing this type of data. And then once you do that, you can then start analyzing the bill of materials to tell the end users what it can be used for. And once you have that in place, then you can start going to that next level in and creating policy at an organizational level, saying, hey, I got this bill of material from vendor A. Does it meet my organizational policy for the types of capabilities that I want to use it for?
Okay, I have a not old hand.
All right, Bunny, you were next.
Yeah, just one one quick go back for Tracy. For the barriers to adoption, are you envisioning actually, doing some user research there to get a ground truth sense of what those barriers are, or are there links that perhaps already capture the barriers that I can look through to help start that documentation in GitHub?
I don't think we know. And, in terms of doing any kind of research, that would have to be something that would be approved to spend some money on. But am I personally going to sit down and do research on this? No, I'm just pointing out that when we look at, if we were to take this, our scope here and set it in front of a handful of VCs, the first thing they would ask us is, what problem are you trying to solve? And we have not defined that. And that's why I feel like it's confusing, because I think we all come to this, and this is what I've seen. It's not I don't want anybody to think that I'm picking on anyone, but I feel like we all come to this with an agenda. We've all worked on SBOMs. We're excited to finally have people to talk about SBOMs too. We want everybody to know what we're doing and what's happening, and how we've interfaced with them, how we've used them, but we haven't as a group defined the problems that we're trying to solve. And if that means we need to go out to get some funding to do some research, then maybe that's what we have to do.
Got you. Thank you.
And when we open the issue, Bunny, can you make sure you capture that?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Thank you. All right, David, you're back up.
Yeah, two completely different topics. I guess I'll take them in reverse order. First of all, as far as the why, I agree with you. Always, it's important to always start with the why are you doing this. That's why I was focusing on those three use cases. The second two use cases, the risk analysis using an SBOM and identification of products in an organization that have that probably have a key vulnerability using SBOMs. I think are really the driving goals, and the generate SBOMs is merely because that's a necessary precondition. You can't analyze SBOMs unless you have SBOMs. So I'd like to at least propose that be an answer to the question. And if you don't disagree with my answer, great. Then let's figure out what the right answer is. Let me push back, although not very much, against Steve. I actually agree with Steve that it is important to be able to answer the question, I have this thing, it claims as an SBOM. Is it useful for this circumstance? I would think that a tool designed to do risk analysis of software components based on an SBOM would also be able to answer the question, is this SBOM I'm getting even useful for my purpose? So while I agree that the function is useful, I think that would just be part of a tool, because if you're trying to analyze an SBOM to answer a question, you should be able to figure out, wait a minute, this input cannot answer the question I'm designed to answer. So I agree with the need for it. I'm hoping that that can just be embedded in one of those other two cases that I mentioned. If I'm wrong, please help me understand why.
Can tool be synonymous with process to like some extent? I guess that's
I think the answer is no.
okay.
Because because tool means automation. And if we're not meeting automation, I don't care. I think that the time when software components had 3 or 4 reused components in them transitively is long in the rearview mirror. We've got to have automation for this stuff. Now, obviously, you're gonna have to have a process that uses the tool.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
referring to is actually
yeah,
like a pipeline, or I mean a script that invokes multiple tools to repeat the same type of thing, but allows another tool to attest to. I mean, I'm trying to understand. I'm attempting to reconcile how is it that a tool can provide from within itself a verifiable means of what it is producing without some sort of observation occurring on the tool itself, like an assumption that the tool is comparable. You sure I'm wrong?
Right, actually, I can answer that one at least the way I think you mean it, but others can jump in here real quick. I mean, I know that the let me be specific about the U.S. government, although they're by no means the only customer. They're getting a lot of pushback from closed source vendors who do not want to reveal a lot of information. I understand that. So, one possibility of the obvious possibility is, hey, I'm a closed source vendor. I will tell you the top level components. I won't tell you the full transitive closure. And and if they do that, the obvious way is to market. Okay, I do include component X. I won't tell you what component X contains. The problem, of course, is that if you were worried about something like log4shell, this is not very helpful because, hey, I include a component, but I won't tell you what's in the component, which means I can't analyze the risks and I can't really determine which products contain which components. So you can, within an SBOM, signal, I stop here. And that could be a big warning flag to a tool that says, okay, I got an SBOM, but it doesn't include most of the information I need to do my job. Does that help?
Actually, yeah, that helps quite a bit actually. So yeah, thank you.
All right, let's make sure we write this down too. This is good. Steve Taylor, you're next.
Yeah, so just kind of taking what David was saying, for risk analysis, there are tools like Open Policy Agent that can be leveraged that will allow us to take the information that the SBOMs contain and make decisions upon whether something is, what, for lack of a better word, trustworthy or not. And the reason why I kind of lean towards Open Policy Agent is because my view of what is risky is going to be different than another person's view of risky. So you can't do a single kind of stamp on the risk level for something. It's going to have to be driven by each individual organization and even possibly each individual team within an organization on what they think risk is. So I think that's where, when we look at risk, that we need to have the data available so it's easy to consume to make those decisions.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will disagree with that. Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree and put a perspective on what Tracy said. I mean, I think that it would be great for us to level set on the problems from two different perspectives. The problems faced by people who want to produce SBOMs, as well as people who want to consume SBOMs, and especially in an automated fashion. And I think that level setting the problems and then identifying the use cases, some of which, I linked some of the ones that have been most helpful for me. I linked them in the issue number 3, as well as a comment there from Cyclone DX. Help me better explain to my own organizations what things we're trying to solve when we're producing better data for SBOMs. To me, SBOMs is the answer. The problem, the thing is just telling people, let's not just produce one to produce one for with some tool for the sake of producing one, but trying to produce one with meaningful data that solves the problems. That could include confidence scoring, different tooling, different whatever it might be, to let automated tools make higher order decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. All right, we're almost out of time. I want to use the last couple of minutes to run through this list and make sure we have everything captured we need to capture. Someone just yell if there's anything we're missing. So we've got Vicky's going to start working on goals and purpose for the group. Now I'll create issues in GitHub for, what is Eric's topic, Vicky? Oh, Eric, you had a topic. What is your topic?
Yeah, so I mean, this is more relevant. What you're talking about is more relevant if you want to go through. I mean, essentially, just at a high level, I'll make it real quick. We're developing Wipro, the COE within Wipro's CTO office is developing a tool that is essentially a aggregation of pipeline and security tooling in line with the SALSA framework's SDLC requirements for securing the supply chain. Essentially what we're doing is bringing together the capability of either integrating existing or provisioning from the ground up a complete pipeline solution with the capabilities of letting you know where you are from a SALSA provenance perspective, at what level you are, incorporating functionality like generating SBOMs, as well as key functionality of pulling in a bunch of different, obviously open source tools to start, but beyond that, integrating proprietary vulnerability and other scanning tools into one cohesive dashboard to completely build and manage the reporting around this. So it's still in its development phase. What I'm looking for is trying to gauge some interest, and I'm doing this quite rapidly. I'd rather have a longer conversation on it, but I know that you want to cover some of the rest of this. But essentially, this would be a complete software supply chain security tool to allow developers to fully provision, manage, and maintain secure development environments from check-in all the way to deployment, and providing consistent and continuous capabilities around what their security posture is in line with SALSA, and it'll incorporate SPDX and other capabilities for SBOMs as well. So very high level, I'll have some things and diagrams to present at a future state. But really what I'm looking for is if this type of aggregation and tooling is of interest to anyone, to see if any of the people within the group would be willing to, as we reach the MVP stage, do some user acceptance testing, talk through some of the functionality and see if there are areas maybe of improvement, and do some of that initial walkthrough with us. So I'm looking for volunteers to potentially help us in the coming months.
I would love that.
Eric, can you just mail the list? I think this is better suited for the mailing list.
Yeah, certainly.
You'll hit a much wider audience then as well.
I'll send over a list of feature functionalities and things, but generally want to present it at a high level is, see who might be interested, and then they can respond to me there.
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. Nice. That's very exciting. All right. I'm going to tear through this really fast now. All right, what do we have? New business. I'll open an issue for clearly defined goals and purpose. Actually, we kind of have an issue for this already. I don't know. Because we started, Cameron and I, there was an issue for, maybe not. Anyway, whatever. All right.
We don't have to vote on it today, but
no, this isn't voting, David. We're just opening issues. I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. We got that. David, you've got these 3 issues. How do we want to capture these and turn them into work?
Frankly, I think the bigger issue, and this is what Vicky hinted at, is we need to figure out, okay, what are we focusing on? So
Okay,
my
so you want
proposal
to
there
tie
would
this
be,
into Vicky's
yeah,
work.
these are the three
Okay.
issues we need to address. We need the easy
Yeah, that's
tools for
fine.
these three cases.
That's fine. All right, so I'll
Do
tie this
people
into
agree?
Vicky's work.
Yeah.
I'll just make a note here.
Okay. So
Yeah,
this is
and-
my and a proposed answer to the question.
Yeah, and this stuff I will be looking at is very, very closely aligned, and if not exactly, the stuff that Tracy's been talking about, really defining the problems, and then looking at how we can, or whether we will, even defining whether we will try to solve the problems, but because some things might not end up in scope or that sort of stuff. So Tracy, I would love to collaborate with you on that. It sounds like you've got a lot of good thoughts as well.
So Tracy had to bail. She put a message in the chat earlier. Okay, so
that's a
Vicky,
shame.
you see the barriers to adoption question? I guess it is basically related, right?
Really just what I will be looking at is starting to iterate with people on the scope and project plan for the SBOM Everywhere initiative.
And do we see barriers to adoption as one of the, I guess that's a piece of what you're working on, right?
It certainly would be a piece.
Okay.
And as Bunny asked, defining whether there are barriers and whether there's prior art or research and all that sort of goodness. So
Yeah.
just coming up with a plan for this group. What are we going to tackle? How are we going to tackle it? What's the basic first pass order of operations?
Right.
To
Yeah.
try and just sort of get a better sense of that. And what do we need funding for?
Yeah, I agree. Like what are the questions? That's fair. Okay, so I'm going to open a second issue for this and reference it from the first, because I think it's a big enough question. So this will be an issue. Vicky's thing will be an issue. And then what else do we have here? Steve, how do you want to deal with your, I guess, bomb analysis tool? I don't know what to call this.
Yeah, this is still, first of all, all OS projects are open for anyone to participate. So I'll send you the information on that if anyone would like to do so.
Tool in OWASP today, or at least a project.
The verification standard was published a few years ago. And we have a working group that meets every 2 weeks on a Thursday morning, I believe, that is coming up with the maturity model. And we are working through that. I believe we have the taxonomy pretty well done now, minus a few minor issues. The next step is going to be working on the maturity model itself, defining how difficult certain things are going to be able to achieve. And once that's done, then it's really just a matter of creating the PDF for human consumption and the JSON. Once the JSON is available, that, again, if you could hook up tools to Open Policy Agent or whatever, because quite frankly, different groups have different expectations for what would be in a bill of material. If I'm a legal department, I'm going to certainly ask for certain things than my security department will.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm just going to open an issue, Stephen, assign it to you and ask you to add a link to the README for all this, because I don't want to duplicate, but I also want to make people aware.
Yeah, very good.
All right. Let's see. Steve Taylor, OPA can help to find. Steve Taylor, is there a work item from this? Is there something you want to do more with this request?
Or do you have any Rego examples of how this could be implemented in OPA?
I wonder if we lost Steve. I bet we did. Okay, I can't think of a work item off that at the moment, which is fine. We're about out of time anyway. If anyone has anything else, bring it to the list, open an issue, there's Slack, whatever floats your boat is fine. I like this. I think this was a great meeting, and I think Vicky and Tracy asked some really hard questions, and that's perfect. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I want to echo that, Josh, and just say that I've attended these meetings in the past, and this one's been quite productive. And I think there's been a good a good healthy dialogue. And thanks again, Josh, for your leadership. And Steve, thanks for joining us for this session. It was
Yep, definitely.
interesting to hear your input.
All right. Until next time, see you all on the other side.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, thanks.